Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Gorbeck. I'm chair of the Thousand Oaks Council on Aging. I'd like to welcome all of you to our April 3rd, 2019 meeting. Would you please all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thank you very much. May we now have the roll call?
Please say here present when I call your name. Chair Gorback.
Here.
Vice Chair Loretta Allen is absent. Commissioner Stephen Allen.
Here.
Commissioner Belding is absent. Commissioner Burt.
Here.
Commissioner Gitt.
Present.
Commissioner Maria is absent. Commissioner Mortimer.
Here.
Commissioner Posta.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Let's go on to number 3 on our number 4 under public comments on our agenda. I don't have any public comment cards. We do have a number of members of the public here. So happy to invite you here to see you here today. Anybody want to fill out a card last minute? No? Okay, thank you. We'll go on to number 5 on our agenda now, the liaison and agency reports. And the first for 5A, Ventura County Area Agency on Aging, and I am going to deliver that report. Commissioner Gitt and I sit on the advisory committee for the Ventura County Area Agency on Aging. I'm just going to do a real brief report today because I just want to be real certain that you here in our audience and the people at home are aware of the services that you can access through this really terrific agency. And you can find it online at VC, stands for Ventura County, .aaa, Area Agency on Aging.org. So this is the homepage when you bring it up. And if we can please click on the button that says Services at the top there. Okay, and you see there's a whole long list of services, and when you click on each one of those, it will open up another page. And these are classes and services that older adults throughout Ventura County can access. If you have not yet looked at this website, please take a minute to do so. If you don't have a computer, there are computers that you can use at the Goebel Center, in the library, in our offices with our city staff, her office is at the library. I mean, there are computers for you to use. Please check out this website. And then I'd like to go over to another tab and go down to video shorts, because if you are someone like I am who enjoys watching short videos, these are videos on all kinds of topics of interest. We're just going to show you this first one. It's very brief, just over a minute, and it is on elder abuse, really important information. So we'll take a minute or so to show that video. The very first one.
A mother.
A father.
A grandparent.
A neighbor.
Un amigo.
A stranger.
These are the faces of elder abuse.
And every case is different.
It's up to all of us to report it.
And it's easy to do.
Every year, an estimated 5 million or 1 in 10 older Americans are victims of elder abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Experts believe that for every reported case of elder abuse or neglect, as many as 23 cases go unreported. Last year in Ventura County, Adult Protective Services responded to more than 4,000 reports of elder abuse or neglect. Whether the abuse is financial, physical, emotional, or basic neglect, our senior citizens and adults with disabilities have the right to protection under the law, even from members of their own family.
So join me.
Join me.
Join me.
Acompáñenme.
As we stop elder abuse today.
Okay, thank you very much. There are dozens of excellent instructional videos like that you will find very, very interesting. So please take a few minutes and check them out. Thank you. And next, I would like to call on Commissioner Posta to facilitate the next part of our meeting.
Patty Ham, who usually gives a report on the Global Adult Community Center, an update of things coming up, couldn't be here today, so I'm going to try to fill in for her. The first Dodger game party is this week, Dodger Week, Friday, April 5th at 1 o'clock. Stop by. Tickets are $7 each, and you could wear all blue if you want to, Dodger blue. Tickets went on sale today for the Cinco de Mayo party, which will be held on May 3rd, Friday, not Sunday, at 5 o'clock. Tickets are $5. You get dinner, dancing, live music, meeting friends, making new friends, having a ball, hopefully, and joining the rest of your Latino friends and neighbors for a great party. It's really great. I've been there for the last 3 years, and we've always had a good time. There's still room in the Will You Pass Your Next Driving Test seminar, Thursday, April 18th at 1:30. I know it's very hard to get into the DMV. I think they're supposed to really add an awful lot of new people to the department to relieve the tremendous wait times they have now. But anyway, if you got to pass your driving test, it's worthwhile to come by and maybe get some lessons to help you pass the test. To come by at the Global Senior Center or call at 805-381-2744 to register for a free seminar. On Thursday, April 25th at 1 o'clock, Pam Sanborn will share her stories and adventures as she walked the 500 miles of the Camino de Santiago. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I should have checked it out to see it was. But 500 miles anywhere is a lot of walking. She's probably has an awful lot of good and interesting stories. Please come by. You can call again at the Global or stop by to register for the presentation, and it's, again, free, as are so many events at the Global. Stop by, pick up a Gazette, check it out. I guarantee you there's going to be at least a half a dozen things that you would spark your interest, from health care to cognitive training. Everything you can think of is there. Stop by and see us. You can always pick up a Gazette there. In fact, if you get on their line, they'll put you on an emailing list, and you get it automatically every week. Can't beat that. And again, it's free. Not everything's free. Some are really expensive, like $3, $5. Stop by, sign up. We'd love to see you. And I think next is C, which is Canal Senior Volunteer Program. We're lucky enough to have the infamous or famous Julie Spivak's going to tell us all about the wonderful happenings over there. Julie?
Thank you so much, Commissioner Posta. Also, just a quick addition, we just got beautiful new flooring throughout the entire Global Center, and thank you to the City of Thousand Oaks. It looks amazing, and they did some upgrades to our bookshelves and the billiards room, and it looks beautiful, so make sure to come by and check that out. Also, in celebration of National Volunteer Week taking place April 7th through 13th, CSVP and the Global Center are recognizing and thanking all of our volunteers who lend their time, service, and support to the community. If you are a CSVP volunteer, please join us on April 11th at 1 p.m. at Conejo Community North Park, that is right behind the Global Center and the library, for an afternoon filled with food, fun, and good company. Please RSVP to the CSVP office by this Friday. And if you aren't a CSVP volunteer and want to come in and do some volunteering around our community, come in and see me. If you have yet to get your taxes done, make sure to visit the CSVP Free Income Tax Preparation Program. This is for seniors 60 years of age and over, or persons with an income of $54,000 or less, regardless of your age. This service is taking place through April 15th, and it takes place Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4 p.m. at Conejo Creek South Community Room. That is at the soccer fields right across the street from the center. And also on Wednesdays at the Newbury Park Library. And an absolutely incredible program run by 45 of our volunteers. And they did over 2,000 free income tax returns last year. Charity Karaoke Sing for a Cause is back. On August 11th, 20 karaoke singers will compete on stage at the Canyon, singing with a live band to raise money for their nonprofit organizations. Last year, our event raised $35,000 for local nonprofits. Also, 2 of these organizations received $1,000 prizes for winning Best Performance and Most Money Raised. Applications are being accepted now through May 10th, and nonprofits will be chosen by the CSVP Advisory Committee and will be notified by May 15th. Nonprofits can participate for free. You can go to our website at www.charitykaraoke.org for more details. Also, please call the CSVP office at 805-381-2742, or you can email me at jspivak@crpd.org for more information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. You always have a bunch of goodies and
Lots of fun
tell us
stuff.
about every month or so. It's just amazing, isn't it? Isn't it a wonderful place we live in? I mean, to have a civic center and a Conejo, volunteer program with all these volunteers to help us, we older people, get through the rest of our lives. Now you have no excuses to say it's boring and there's nothing to do. Come by, just listen to all these wonderful things that are out there. All you got to do is call or come by.
Perfect.
Hope you're there.
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time and your reports. Let's go on now to commissioner reports. We are on section 6A of our agenda, and I'd like to call on Commissioner Allen to report on caregiving.
Thank you, Chairman Gorbach. If you need some help finding senior caregiving information or resources online, then you will be interested in this presentation today. Where can I look online? Here are 3 of the major locally based websites where you can find information and resources for all of your caregiving needs. I will show this slide later on in the presentation. Caregiving is need and assistance for seniors when their activities of daily living are impaired by old age, disability, disease, or mental dysfunction. Conejo Valley Village, the first website listed here, provides access to local volunteers, trained and background checked, who focus on helping you live safely and independently in your own home. Senior Concerns, the second website listed, also aims to help seniors remain in their own homes. Their website boasts that if you have a question about seniors, we have the answer. And lastly, Ventura County Area Agency on Aging, what we prefer to call VC-AAA, it's easier, promotes the development and implementation of a comprehensive system of care that enables older individuals and their caregivers to live in a community-based setting. Next slide, please. Today, I'll walk you through VC-AAA's website. Next slide, please. So this is VC-AAA's homepage. You will need to pull down the menu under Our Services. Let's see what's on the in-home support page. Next slide, please. When you go to these specific topic pages, this website will define terminology that will give you keywords that will help you formulate questions to ask, as well as you'll find a link to additional service contacts. Next slide, please. It may be difficult to sort through all of the available resources, and you may need a hand as you research topics of interest or look to fulfill an immediate need. Try calling a support group and ask for help. Next slide, please. Finding a nursing or long-term care facility is a journey. This website guides you to several services. An ombudsman is a specially trained and certified individual who advocates for the elderly residents in long-term care facilities. pre-planning counseling is an introduction to the world of long-term care that is facilitated by an ombudsman. It may benefit you to pick up the phone and call for help. Next slide, please. Here are those 3 websites again. Please take note of them and write down these phone numbers. VC AAA phone number is 805-477-7300. Thank you for tuning in to our program today. I hope this information will be helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent information, Commissioner Allen. We appreciate that. Let's go to 6B on our agenda now, and I'm going to call on Commissioner Gitt to report on emergency preparedness.
Thank you, Karen. Can I get a slide up, Francine, please? Next slide. So I want to talk just a little bit about the challenges of emergencies and the need for planning. You're all here, so I assume you survived the fires and the rains, but are you really ready for the next disaster? Is there an evacuation? If there's an evacuation order, do you know what you'll do? If you remain at home, do you know how to shut off the gas, electricity, and water? If local service on the telephone is down, have you designated someone out of the area as your emergency contact? Do you and your neighbors know what special needs each of you may have? Next slide, please. If you answered yes to the previous 3 questions, then my work here is done. If you answered no to any of these questions, then you may want to work on your disaster plan. Next slide, please. You need to make a plan, conduct a self-assessment of what might happen if disaster strikes, assemble a kit that includes your medications, water, food, flashlight, radio, extra batteries, extra clothes, blankets, first aid kit, dust mask, whistle, and plan for your pets if you have any. Next slide, please. California is a wonderful place to live, but we have fires, floods, and earthquakes. You need to make your emergency preparedness plan now and update it regularly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Also excellent, really important information. Thank you very much, Commissioner Gitt. I'd like to go on now to Section 6C on our agenda and call on Commissioner Burt to report on scams and frauds.
Welcome, everybody. Last month, I spoke about the most common scams facing seniors these days. They were the grandparents, sweepstakes, romance, and identity theft. Today, quickly, I'd like to talk about Senate Bill 3522. And actually, what is it? It was introduced by Senators Bob Casey and Jerry Moran into the Senate 115th Congress of the United States Senate. It was to establish a senior scams prevention advisory council to oversee the Senior Scams Prevention Act. And the bill currently is in committee with Commerce, Science, and Transportation. The act is in place, but the advisory council is in committee still. Who are the members of this particular council? Who are they recommending to be on it? Some pretty big people in terms of our government: the chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, secretary of the Treasury, the Attorney General, the director of the Bureau of Consumer Affairs. And they also looked at the actual business sectors, and so they chose not to have more than 2 from each particular sector of retail, gift card, telecommunications, wire transfers, senior peer advocates, consumer advocacy agencies, financial services, and one of the things that they've now included is digital currency. Not that we do anything with digital currency, but that's obviously something that's on the topic. And also prepaid cards, whether they be gift, telephone cards, things like that. Well, what are the duties of this advisory council? What are they commissioned to do? Actually, what they're going to do is collect information about educational resources that can help seniors. They're looking at models which they can distribute nationally and also, of course, locally to the governments so that seniors in those particular areas will be as well informed as possible. They look at how the best ways to prevent scams from affecting seniors, how to update their particular scams. So each month there is another scam that seems to be the hot topic for the month. And so they're going to have updates in terms of that. They're also going to provide training for employees of very important companies, the companies that you deal with, whether or not they're telephone cards, whether they're wire transfers that you may have to make. A common one is an ACH transfer, which is an electronic transfer. We call it an automatic clearinghouse transfer, and it puts money into other areas, whether you want to pay your bills. They'll be able to pay those bills very, very quickly. Something to be concerned about. Why was this introduced? This bill, the Senior Scams Prevention Act, obviously far too many seniors are targeted in our society. They're very vulnerable. They may not have the current education that's necessary, whether that be computer access that's savvy in terms of protection. These criminals, they can threaten legal actions against seniors and demand that you pay immediately or that you send them gift cards, you make wire transfers, something to be concerned about. Seniors, of course, at this point are the most vulnerable population in our society in terms of this, other than, of course, you have very young children, but they, of course, have parents, or most of them do. What can you do as a senior in order to help yourself? You can contact the Senate's Aging Committee toll-free line, and they have a line that's staffed with fraud investigators, 855-303-9470. A local law enforcement here in Thousand Oaks, 805-494-8200. Use your common sense. If you feel that this is a scam, talk with a family member, talk with a friend. Use your common sense. Don't act until you feel comfortable with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And boy, it's good to hear that this serious problem has gotten the attention of the folks in D.C. Thank you for an excellent report, Commissioner Burt. And then next we're going to go to number 6D on our agenda, which is Senior of the Year. And so I'm going to report on that, and we would love you to put down June 13th, 2019 on your calendars, because that is the Senior of the Year Awards Banquet. And this is going to be my 6th year attending, and each year is better than the next. And we are going to honor, the Senior of the Year is selected, of course, but we honor all the candidates, and there are 5 terrific individuals this year. We will let you know who they are at the next televised meeting. But something extra special this year is going to be entertainment by a local comic, Jason Love. And if you've ever seen, I have seen his shows. He's fabulous. You will have a good time. You will have fun, laughs, excellent food, a wonderful program, and you will meet some of the most motivational, dynamic people of any age in our community. Tickets will be available May 1st at the Goebel Center. We don't have a price on them quite yet. They're fairly inexpensive. Last year they were $6. So be sure, put that on your calendar, grab your tickets because they will sell out, and they'll be available again May 1st at the Goebel Center. Thank you. You may even win a door prize. And if you are a local business and would like to become one of our sponsors by donating a door prize or helping out in some way, please give our office a call. We are very happy to speak with you. And now I would like to turn the meeting over to Commissioner Mortimer, who will introduce our guest speaker for the day.
Thank you. Dr. Taki is the head of neurology at Los Robles Regional Medical Center. He is a graduate of Dow Medical College in Pakistan and moved to the United States for his postgraduate training in 2005. He completed a neurology residency at the University of Tennessee, Memphis, then chose to pursue his career in vascular neurology and completed a neurocritical care and neuroendovascular surgery fellowship at Medical College of Wisconsin. He is board certified in neurology, vascular neurology, and critical care neurology. He has authored several medical articles and has been a principal investigator for several ongoing trials in vascular and endovascular neurosciences. Dr. Taki has also been committed to community education. He expanded the stroke education efforts along with the American Heart Association in the Coachella Valley, and for his effort, he was recognized as a board of director and later president-elect for the American Heart Association of Coachella Valley. He is a member of the American Heart Association, the Society of Vascular Intervention, and the Society of Neurointervention Surgery. He is devoted to the field of vascular neurosciences and continues to elevate the care of patients suffering from neurovascular diseases in his community. Please welcome Dr. Taki.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind introduction. And thanks for having me here. And thanks for all the folks that came to listen and the people that are listening on the TV. So I'll be talking about a very important health care problem, which is a stroke. So as we know that a stroke is not the number one cause of death in U.S., but it's the number one cause of disability. So it doesn't kill people as much as the heart attack or the cancers, but it makes people disabled. And it only doesn't affect that person, but affects the people around them. Because if somebody at the age of 60 has a stroke, you lose a productive member of the community, and the rest of the community has to take care of that patient. So I'll go through some examples and talk about what can we do to prevent a strokes and what do we look for in a patient who's having a stroke. All the images and the videos are by the consent of the patients. You can move it more if you need. So before I start and go into the case, so this stroke by the layman language, people understand it as there's a blood clot like a heart attack in the brain, and when they're having symptoms of a stroke, they should take an aspirin. So that's a very wrong thought process. So the stroke could mean two things. The stroke could mean that you may have a blockage in the brain, and you're getting lack of oxygen, and that's causing the symptoms and producing brain damage. Or you can also have a hemorrhage into the brain. That means that one of the aneurysm in the brain or one of the small blood vessels in the brain have ruptured, and that's causing the bleeding. And if you take an aspirin at that time, it's going to make it worse. So the first rule is that we identify the stroke, and when you identify somebody's having a stroke or you identify yourself having symptoms of a stroke, do not take an aspirin. It's not like heart attack. You call 911 and go to the hospital. So this is a 64-year-old gentleman who was transferred to us from the field after developing an acute onset of left hemiparesis, which means that on the left side he could not move, and neglect means that he was not recognizing the left side of his body or the left side of the environment. On the way to the hospital, he improved a couple of times in the ambulance and then got worse again. By the time he came to us, he became again hemiparetic on the left side. Can you open your eyes? Can you look to the left? Without moving your head. Can you look to the left? Look at me here. Do you see my fingers on the left?
Yes.
How many fingers do you see?
One.
Okay. Can you lift up your left arm? Douglas, can you lift your arms up? Lift your arms up. Can you lift your left arm up? Can you lift up your left leg? You can bring your right arm down. So he was able to move his right side, was not able to move the left side of the body. Also, you can see that his eyes are looking to the right side, so which means he's ignoring the left side of the body. That's also a symptom of a stroke, suggestive that this patient will require a surgical treatment. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But he was a very healthy guy, did not have any medical problems, did not have high blood pressure, did not have cholesterol, and this happened in the middle of he was eating a dinner with his family and friends. So the number one lesson from this is that a stroke can happen at any age and can affect anyone. So we see stroke in patients 20-year-old, 30-year-old. We see patients who are extremely healthy and do not have any plaques in the body, because the cause of the stroke could be different in different age group. The number one cause of a stroke in a young population or somebody who's very healthy in the middle age is a dissection or a tear in the blood vessel. So anybody can develop that. So if you develop a tear in the blood vessel, and that could be as simple as a violent sneeze, a violent cough, or if you go and stretch your neck at a massage parlor or whatever smallest thing can trigger that tear, and the tear leads to development of the clot, and then the clot travels to the brain. So that's exactly what happened with him. He had a tear in his artery in the neck, and then the tear formed a clot and sent it into the brain. So this is an angiogram showing that the right side of his brain is not getting any blood flow. There's a complete blockage here, and you can see the artery gets very narrowed. This is where the tear is. So we go with the small, tiny catheters through the groin. So these procedures, we've been doing it only for the last 8-10 years, and they're very effective in removing the blood clot from the brain. So we go with these tiny catheters into the brain and put a stent into the brain and then drag the clot out with the stent. So we don't leave the stent, we take the stent and the clot out. Once the artery is open, so you see this artery was all missing. This part of the brain was not filling before. When the artery is all open, then we went and fixed his dissection of the tear with 2 stents. So remember, this part of the blood vessel was very narrowed, so that's all fixed. And these are the clots that came from his brain. So there's a small clot of 1 centimeter in the brain. It means a huge clot because the blood vessels in the brain are very small. This is him next day in
My name
ICU.
is Douglas Tapking. I'm 66 years old, and this is my first experience with a stroke. Hopefully my last experience with one.
Yes. Can you smile? Big smile. Good. Bring your arms up. Okay, great. Okay, lift your left leg. Good. And do you remember what happened?
I do remember what happened. I was sitting at dinner on Friday night with friends when all of a sudden I became Mr. Mumbles, and I could not speak coherently, and the left side of my face began drooping dramatically, and my friend said, "What's wrong?" And I couldn't respond. I became very weak, and we called 911, and they came into the restaurant and hauled me out.
So again, a few things to get from this case, right? One is that a stroke can happen in anyone. As I said, no matter what age you are, what risk factors do you have, if you have symptoms of a stroke, it's quite possible that you are having a stroke. The symptoms of a stroke, the easiest way to remember is if you remember the acronym FAST, F-A-S-T, that stands for face, if somebody's face is drooping. A is arm, if the arm, and then S is for speech. So if there's somebody's speech is altered and they can talk, or they're able to talk but they do not make any sense, then that's a symptom of stroke. And T stands for time. So the time is important because every minute you're losing millions of brain cells. So every minute counts when it comes to stroke or heart attack or any other part of the body which is not getting blood flow. But it's particularly important for brain because it's such a vital organ in the body. So the second thing to learn from this is that time is very important, and you call 911. Don't drive yourself. So if somebody thinks that they're having a stroke, if you start driving to the hospital, even if you're 10 minutes away or 5 minutes away from the hospital, we don't know you're coming to the hospital. So we are not prepared for your CT scan. May have another patient. We may not have the pharmacist there to mix the medication for you. We may not have the interventionist there to take you to surgery. So when you call 911 and they evaluate you, they give us a call from your home that this is a stroke patient that we're bringing to the hospital. So that gives us time to be prepared for the patient as soon as they come there, because the treatments are very time dependent. So that's how we are able to treat the patients very effectively when they come from the ambulance, as opposed to when they come and show them, are brought in by the family. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is that, your chances of recovery are obviously higher if you get to the hospital in a faster time. And again, the 4th is that don't take an aspirin, because you don't know until you get to the hospital. If we don't know, until we do a CT scan, we don't know if this is a hemorrhagic stroke, which is a bleeding, or this is ischemic stroke, which is from a blood clot. So this is an example of another patient came in.
Okay, can you look at my
unable to move the left side of the
Follow
body.
my finger with your eyes. Can you try to lift up your right arm? Lift up your left arm. Lift this arm up.
This is again very weak on the left side, and this is after they remove the blood clot.
Good. And can you bring your arms up? Excellent. And do you remember what happened?
Yes.
You can bring your arms down.
This is another patient in last month. Came in with inability to talk The right side of her face is droopy. And again, the right side
No,
of the
not with
body
your
is
left
not
arm.
droopy.
Just try to lift up your right arm. Can you? No. Can you smile? Can you look to your right? Right. Can you lift your right leg up? Yeah.
She's unable to move the right side. The right side of the body is controlled by the left side. The left side of the body is controlled by the right side of the brain. So the clot is in the left side of the brain. This is the artery. It's called middle cerebral artery that supplies the left side of the brain. So again, you see there's no filling in this part of the brain is empty. So we go in, we put a catheter and the stent, remove the blood clot, and now the entire brain is filling. And that's sort of the next day in ICU.
After? Yeah. Can you say your name?
Ronaldin Venus.
And smile. And bring your arms up. With your arms up. All right. Great.
So again, you know, the outcome is dependent on how quickly you reach the hospital. If the brain is already dead, no matter how quick we act, if the patient comes to the hospital after several hours, if they start having the symptoms like half of their body goes numb, or they're having facial droop or slurred speech and they ignore it and they go to sleep and they wake up unable to move one side of the body, by that time, most likely there is significant damage already done to the brain. So even if we remove the blood clot, it's not going to be as impactful as it could be. So again, remember there are two types of a stroke. One is called ischemic stroke, which is from a blood clot. So if this is the artery, the clot comes either from below and from the heart or from the neck and just get stuck here, or you can form a plaque locally here. So if this is the kind of stroke where you're not getting blood flow beyond this area. So here we need blood thinners, here we need to go in and remove the blood clot. But this is the other kind of stroke, which is called a hemorrhagic stroke. This is where you're bleeding either from an aneurysm or from an artery in the brain. And again, in this stroke, the worst thing that you can do to yourself is to take a blood thinner and make this bleeding worse. About 85% or 87% of the strokes are ischemic from a blood clot. About 10 to 15% are from the hemorrhages. And obviously, as you grow older, the risk of a stroke goes higher. Slightly more in women than men. Again, stroke is the number 4th cause of death, but it's the number 1 cause of disability. There are some risk factors based on the race. So African Americans are highest risk, followed by Hispanics, followed by Caucasian. Obviously, this is something not in our control, but it's good to know what risk factor you belong to. This is an old statistics, but still there are 795,000 strokes every year, which means every 40 seconds somebody is having a stroke. And if you look at the map, the darker the purple color is, the higher is the risk of a stroke. This is where I did my training in Tennessee. It's called a stroke belt, or in the South, just because of the unhealthy lifestyle and some genetic components. But we are kind of in the middle. We are light purple, so we do have a healthy population in general. What is a TIA? If anybody has heard that term, your doctor may talk about you had a mini stroke or you had a TIA. All it means is that for a brief period of time, your brain did not get blood flow, and the blood flow established itself. So whether there was a clot or a blockage, it was not severe enough to last for too long that it caused permanent damage to the brain. So you did have symptoms, but it got better. So that's being lucky that you got better doesn't mean that it's less important. It's equally important to share with your doctors right away if you have the symptoms of a stroke and they go away. So if somebody had slurred speech or somebody had facial droop for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and it went away, doesn't mean that the storm is over. It means that it will come back again. So most of the patients who have TIA will develop a stroke within the next 24 hours or the first week of having a TIA. And about 12% of these people will die within a year if you don't identify what caused it. Because if you have a TIA or stroke-like symptom, there's something wrong within the body. It's telling you to seek medical attention, tell your doctor that, this happened to me. They may find a plaque in the carotid artery. They may find that you have irregular heartbeat. So there are several things that needs to be ruled out to appropriately address the issue that caused the TIA. We spend a lot of money in taking care of the stroke patients, and as you see, most of the cost is spent in hospitalization and the loss of productivity. So again, if you see those 3 patients, and that's just example in the last few months, that if you have patients at this age of 60, 55-year-old, they're coming to the hospital with stroke and they're not amenable for treatment, then their whole life is destroyed. They're going to be disabled, and then again, they lose what they're doing in the community, and then the community has to pick up this slack to pay for that cost. But if we can, the best thing is to prevent a stroke, and I'll talk about that, how to prevent the strokes. But if you are having a stroke and you can get the treatment in the right time, then we can reduce this huge cost for everybody. So the stroke costs are predicted to be more than double in the next 20 years because our aging population is increasing. So we have more octogenarians, we have more 80-year-old, 90-year-old patients, and obviously the risk of a stroke goes higher as you grow older. Not only that, but the people who are middle age, the stroke of incidence in that age group is also increasing, just because the environmental factors, lack of proper preventive medication. The cost to treat stroke is expected to increase by 20% by 2030. And again, these are important stats. The cost to treat a stroke may increase from $71 billion to $180 billion. So why time is important? Again, as I said, every minute you're losing 1.9 million brain cells. So neurons are brain cells. So in 1 minute, you're losing 1.9 million brain cells. If there's a 1 hour delay in getting to the hospital, you have lost 120 million brain cells. So that puts you at 3.6 years more of your age. So if somebody is 56, if they're having stroke symptoms for an hour, their brain age has already been advanced to almost 60 years. So in 1 hour, you had aged 4 years. So that's why time is very important. There are arteries in the brain, which we call large blood vessels. So the stroke treatments, if somebody is having ischemic stroke, the treatments are of 2 types. One is that you can get the medication. If it's a clot is in the small, tiny blood vessel that we can't see on the angiogram, then the treatment is just a blood thinner that we give through the IV, but that can only be given within 4.5 hours. So if somebody start having symptoms of a stroke last night, they come to the hospital in the morning, unfortunately, there's nothing to offer if they're having the stroke from a small blood vessel. But if they are within 4.5 hours, we can give the medication to potentially reverse that stroke. The other kind of stroke is a large vessel stroke, which is a stroke because of the blood clot in a bigger blood vessel. If the blood clot is occluding or obstructing the main blood vessels of the brain, like I showed you, then the treatment is surgical. So we still give them medication, but we go in from the groin into the brain and remove the blood clot. And if somebody does not undergo that procedure, if somebody comes in with a blockage in the internal carotid artery, which that first patient had, the mortality is 53%. So half of those people won't survive that. If they have a clot in the MCA, like the second lady, their mortality is 27%. And if somebody comes in with a clot in the back of the head, the 90% of the people don't survive that if we don't remove the blood clot in a timely fashion. So again, the symptoms of a stroke, we talk about fast, which are the typical symptoms, but there are some atypical symptoms, which mean that somebody is having a stroke and a back part of the brain may not have the typical symptoms of a stroke. And those could include a sudden onset of vertigo, double vision, confusion, loss or any changes in the vision, or abnormal gait or abnormal speech. If somebody is walking, but they're all of a sudden walking like a drunk person, that's not normal. So you can't remember or identify all those symptoms, but what you can remember is any symptom that comes in abruptly and acutely, like one moment they're normal talking to you, and the next moment they're not making any sense. One moment they were walking fine, and all of a sudden now they can't go from the table to the restroom. So those abrupt changes are always stroke related unless proven otherwise. So risk factors for stroke, what can we do to reduce our risk of stroke? If you're a smoker, obviously you want to quit smoking. It takes about 10 years to get rid of the effect of smoking that is on blood vessels. Hypertension. So if you have hypertension, doesn't mean that you have high risk of a stroke if it's uncontrolled hypertension. So if you're diagnosed with hypertension, but you take medication and control the blood pressure, then your risk of stroke would be the same as any other person. The same thing with cholesterol. If you have high cholesterol, but you bring it down, you take the medication, you control your diet, then your risk of a stroke will go down. But if the cholesterol remains high, then you're much higher risk for having a stroke. Same thing with diabetes. If you have uncontrolled blood sugar, then your risk of a stroke would be high. But if you have diabetes and you control your blood sugar, then your risk of a stroke would be low. Atrial fibrillation is very common in advanced age. So above 80 years of age, it's very common. The heart gets a little bit dilated and then it starts beating irregularly. So when the heart beats regularly, there's no blood sitting in the heart. The blood is always circulating. When the heart beats irregularly, there's the blood start pooling in the heart chambers. And whenever the blood is not moving, it clots, right? If you're bleeding outside, the blood doesn't stay liquid, right? It comes out and then it becomes solid very, very quickly, or becomes like a gel very quickly. So that same thing happened in the heart. If the heart is not beating regularly, then it will form clot, and those clot will eventually go into the brain. So that's the number one cause of a stroke in elderly population, is atrial fibrillation. So if somebody is having palpitation, or if they feel like their heart is beating too fast, that's something they need to bring attention to their primary care doctors, that they need to be checked for that. Blockage in the neck. So if somebody has a stenosis in the arteries in the neck, if it's more than 70%, that increases the risk of a stroke. So again, a normal physical and evaluation by a primary care physician should be able to identify that. The non-modifiable risk factors that are not under our control, but still we need to know them. If somebody has a strong family history of a stroke, like if you have your siblings or your parents died of a stroke at a younger age, that means that you are, no matter what your risk factors are, like even if you don't have cholesterol, if you don't have hypertension, but you have a family history of strokes or heart attack at a young age, then you are at higher risk for stroke or heart attack. So all you can do in that case is take care of the other risk factors. So make sure that your diet is very good, make sure that you're doing exercise every day and controlling the other risk factors. The same thing with the race. As I said, the African Americans are more than Caucasian to have more likely to have a stroke, but you can't change those genetics, at least not yet. So all we can do is to control the risk factors. So control the other risk factors, including smoking, hypertension, cholesterol, and etc. So we all have to remember again the two types of a stroke. There's a ischemic stroke from a blood clot and a hemorrhagic stroke from bleeding. So do not take an aspirin when you're having a stroke symptom at home. And the ischemic strokes are two types. One is because of the blockage in the small blood vessel. These strokes are called lacunar stroke. The other one is a large blood vessel. These are called elbow or large vessel occlusion. Treatment for these stroke is surgical. Treatment for this stroke is medical. So this is important to understand as a community, because before 1995, a stroke was not a treatable disease. In 1995, there was a first trial published, the medication called TPA, as in a layman term, it's called clotbuster. That was approved by FDA in 1995 to treat a stroke. And what it means that if patients comes to the hospital, they get this medication. The medication is given through the IV, but it goes and attacks the clot and dissolves the clot. So when we started giving that medication, the hospitals all over the U.S. did not have the medication or did not have the means to give the medication. Like they did not have the neurologist to evaluate the patient. They did not have CT scanners ready for those patients. So then all the societies in the U.S., it took about a decade to sit down and say, we have to have a system where the patients from the field, like if somebody calls 911, they are taken to a center where they can get the medication. Because if you end up in a center on the other end of Ventura where you cannot get medication, obviously by the time you're going to be transferred to the hospital, it's going to be too late. So that happened in 2008, that we started developing what's called primary stroke centers. And those are the centers where the Joint Commission goes and evaluate and certify that, okay, these centers can give TPA safely. Because it's a very dangerous medication if you don't give it safely, if you don't give it to the right population, if you don't look at the CT scan or the criteria the patient needs to be met, then it can cause more harm like any other medication. So we now have almost all the hospitals in the Ventura County are primary stroke center, which means that they are capable of giving the medication. But what happened after the surgical treatments were approved? So these treatments were approved only in 2015. So we're only about 4 years out doing these surgical procedures as a standard of care. there was no designation of the surgical centers in the county, and we developed our own scoring system, and I worked with the EMS to form this score that when they see the patient, they can score based on their findings, clinical exam, and then they decide if this patient is having the stroke of number 1 type or number 2 type. And if they're having a stroke of number 2 type, now they take them straight to the surgical center. So that has reduced our timing to treat the patient with the surgical treatment by several hours, because otherwise they would, now in the Ventura County, there are only 2 hospitals, St. John's and Los Robles, that is capable of offering the surgical treatment. So half of the county comes to Los Robles, half of the county goes to St. John's. But before this system was implemented, they would end up anywhere, and then they would wait for an ambulance and the transport, and somebody would accept them to transport them to the other hospital. So how does the stroke occur? As I said, most of the time it's a blood clot that comes from the heart, goes into the brain. At times there's a plaque formation within the brain. If it's a plaque formation, then we have to open up with a stent. If it's a clot, we drag the clot out of the body. So this is how it works. The clot gets dislodged either from the heart or from one of the arteries in the neck. And then it goes into the brain and gets stuck wherever there's an artery dividing into 2 arteries. And as soon as it gets stuck here, that's when the symptoms of a stroke start. So these are, there are 2 different kind of stent retrievers. Now there are more coming into the market that we use to drag the clots out. So this is a stent which is attached to the wire. So the first step is that we put a tube in the neck through the groin, and then we take this tiny wire through the clot. This blood vessel is around 2 millimeter. So we take the tiny wire and put this tiny tube beyond the clot. And through the tube, then we deploy the stent, which means that we take the stent and open it up within the clot. So that you see this, the stent is now opening within the clot. As it opens within the clot, it engages the clot and kind of grabs the clot. And this picture is showing the stent is opening within the clot. So this is the clot. It's expanding within the clot. And then as soon as you open the stent, there's a blood flow established. And you let it sit there for a few minutes for it to engage and let the blood flow through it. And then after a few minutes, we drag it out. One of the things that we have changed in the recent past is that we now use this tube to block the blood flow so that we don't lose the clot into the deep part of the brain. So the clot comes out into the tube, and then we drag it outside the body. So hemorrhagic stroke, which is the other kind of stroke, which is from the bleeding, is most of the time from a rupture of a small blood vessel. Somebody has high blood pressure for a long time, their blood vessels get weaker, and eventually one of the blood vessels just pops and can cause bleeding inside the brain. Most of the time we try to control it with medication, bringing the blood pressure down, reversing any blood thinner if they're on blood thinners, and sometimes they need surgically go and take the blood out of the head to prevent secondary damage. The primary damage has already occurred. In about 20% of the time, the reason for hemorrhage is from a vascular malformation, which means the patients are either born with abnormal blood vessels or they have developed an aneurysm through their life, which has now ruptured. An aneurysm is a blood vessel is like the tube. So the aneurysm is weakening in the blood vessel wall, and then it gets bigger and bigger and becomes this balloon type. So it's like a balloon getting bigger, and eventually the balloon pops. And when it pops, that's when it causes bleeding, and a lot of time patients don't even survive it before coming to the hospital. So we used to treat them with open surgery. So we have to open the head, dissect the brain, and put a clip across it to stop the bleeding. But now we don't have to do all that. We can just go from inside and put a small tiny catheter into the aneurysm and fill it with metal coils so it doesn't bleed again, and pack it. We still often do the open surgery about 10% of the time, but 80 to 90% of the time we can treat them from inside. So this is kind of the same concept as treating the stroke. We take a small wire. These are very thin wires that goes into the aneurysm. And the key is that we don't want to touch the aneurysm. So we're talking about 3-4 millimeter dilatations. So we take the catheter very carefully inside the aneurysm without touching the walls. So they're very easy to rupture. And once the tube is inside the aneurysm, then we can fill it with metal coils. These are soft coils that can fill the aneurysm, and then once it's filled, the blood is not flowing through it, so it doesn't have any risk of bleeding again. So again, a stroke was not treatable before 1995. After 1995, we developed the treatment for stroke and then developed the system to triage patients to the center where they can be treated. So in 2004, we started developing primary stroke centers. 2012, we started designating comprehensive stroke centers. These are examples of the trials that were published. This was the first device which did not work very well. So we started doing these procedures in 1998, but it took about 2 decades to develop the technology to do it safely and effectively. And because time is so important, we used to be able to open the blood vessels, but we were not able to open them in a timely fashion, so the patient will still end up with a bigger stroke. So in 2012, these devices were introduced, and after that, the treatment for stroke changed significantly. These are the trials that were published in the New England Journal, so that's the most prestigious journal from very different parts of the world. One was from Netherlands, Australia, Canada, Spain, and US. So all countries participated in the trials and showed that the benefit of the surgery was more than the benefit of the medications only. These were the results of the trial. Skip through them. So this is an example of a 77-year-old female went to the bathroom in the middle of the night, developed hemiparesis after going to the restroom. So we know that she was fine until she went to the bathroom. The husband heard the thump. She fell to the ground. 911 was called and patient was brought at 3:30 in the morning. So this is where the importance of pre-notifications. If we would not have developed the system working with the EMS for the Ventura County, then this patient could have been taken to any hospital, and then takes 2 hours to transfer to the hospital where they can offer surgical treatment. So the purpose of developing that system was that patients like these just don't waste time in going to other hospital and then instead of that, go to the hospital where they can get the right treatment. So at 3:30 in the morning, the second thing is that at 3:30 in the morning, a lot of people are not in the hospital. The technicians are not in the hospital. The anesthesiologist not. The interventionalist like myself who's doing a procedure, they don't live in the hospital. Practically we do, but technically don't. So at 3:30 in the morning, it's hard to get the team together unless you get the notification from the field. So this patient was called from the field. As soon as she came in, I was there to evaluate the patient. Within 3 minutes, we had the CT scan. So that tells us that this is not a hemorrhagic stroke. So now we know, okay, we can give her the medication, the TPA, and we can take her for surgery. So within 20 minutes, we started the medication. The average time to start this medication is 60 minutes nationwide. So Los Robles is very proud of having very efficient timings in offering the treatments. Diane, can you say your name?
Yeah.
What's your name?
Diana.
The stat's 87, you know that?
Yeah, I'm just putting her in high flow 2 right now.
Can you lift this arm up? Lift your right arm.
So
Lift your left arm. If you move this left leg, move your right leg up. This one. Again, she's paralyzed on the left side. Within 55 minutes, we have her on the table. This is the angiogram showing there's a blockage in the right side of the brain. We go in with the stent and remove the part of the plaque. So she had a plaque in the neck that went up into the brain. Just took that out. As you see, this blood vessel is now completely open. So within 2 hours, she had all the tests done, surgery was done. And can you say your full name?
It's Diana Elizabeth Becerra.
Do you remember what happened?
Not fully, no.
What did your husband tell you?
You were not able to move your left side?
Yes, that's what he noticed. I was surprised. I didn't realize that was really happening.
Yeah. And how are you feeling now?
I feel kind of weak and tired, which is to be expected, of course.
But you don't have any weakness on your left. Can you lift your left arm up?
Oh,
Both,
absolutely.
both your arms?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So these are very different type of clots that we took out from the brain. Again, until we go in, we don't know what kind of a clot, what's the length of the clot we're dealing with, but every clot is very different. It's like, the fishermen like to show their fishes. There's an example of a hemorrhagic stroke. There's a 60-year-old gentleman, is from Riverside, was working here in Oxnard, all of a sudden developed a very severe headache. So the hallmark of hemorrhagic strokes is bad headache. So if somebody comes in with a weakness and they had a headache at the onset, that kind of suspect this. That's very suspicious for having a hemorrhage. So he came in, he was in coma already by the time he came to the hospital and had a very large aneurysm. So this is a CT scan. So anything that's white within the brain is blood. So his entire ventricular system, which is supposed to be black, filled with fluid, is filled with blood, and that all blood is clotted. So there's no fluid passing through the brain, causing increased pressure and further damage, causing pressure around the brainstem that's making him being in a coma. So these patients require very aggressive treatment initially. So we have to go and fix the aneurysm right away. So this is the aneurysm right in the middle of the head. And we go from inside, and you can see these are the coils that we saw that animated video. So the aneurysm is completely gone. This ball is gone. So once the aneurysm is secured, then we can give them blood thinners within those cavities to dissolve the blood. So now you can see that within a day, all the blood is gone, and his brain is start relaxing. He was discharged to rehab, and now
Say your name again?
pretty much living a
Rick
normal
Garrison.
life.
Good. And you know where you are?
I'm in Thousand Oaks.
Great. Can you lift both your arms up? Straight up in front of you? All right.
At that time, he was walking with a walker. After 3 months, he started walking by himself, very independent now. So again, stroke does not only, this is an example of another aneurysm. So this is a brain aneurysm before, and this is after treatment. So again, the stroke does not only affect old people, it affects any age. So this is a 22-year-old male who was transferred to us from St. John Hospital, presented with a big hemorrhage, and had what's called an atriovenous malformation. So this is what you're born with usually. So these are malformations within the blood vessels of the brain that at some point in the life leads to bleeding. And this is a CT scan again showing that all his ventricles are filled with blood, causing increased pressure. So we go in with the tiny catheters and inject glue-like material into these blood vessels to block them. So you can see this is before, this is after. This whole thing is gone. And once we block them, then a colleague of mine who's an open neurosurgeon goes in and remove it by dissection. So we have to, these are slightly different than aneurysm. The aneurysm we just treat from inside and leave them alone. These, most of the time, we still have to do an open surgery to remove them so that later on they don't come back. It's almost like a tumor. And he's back in college now. Okay, so what we learn is time is brain. It's very, very important that you call 911 as soon as you figure out somebody around you or you yourself having a stroke. The stroke onset is very abrupt and acute. The symptoms are usually one-sided. Remember fast face, arm, speech, and time, and remember the level of stroke centers in your community. This is our team at the California Institute of Neuroscience. That's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Wow.
Yes.
Well, no, I just want to thank you. That was fascinating. My goodness. Wow. Could I ask a very quick question?
Sure.
I didn't know about the aspirin. That is such good information, I think, for everybody. Well, I won't say it, but you have taught us don't go for the aspirin with stroke symptoms. You also mentioned vertigo, and I think that is somewhat common. And what precautions would you recommend for people who get a sudden case of vertigo, dizziness.
They have to seek medical attention, so they should go to the ER and get evaluated.
And also, you would recommend don't take any medication.
Don't take
for
any
that either.
medication before you go, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And question, Commissioner Burt.
Oh, great presentation. Thank you. The coils that you mentioned, which you inject in that aneurysm, do they require any maintenance, or are they there forever, or how does that work? And I assume you monitor that, of course,
Yeah.
but
So they don't require any maintenance, and they are there forever. But sometimes, about 10% of the time, the aneurysm can grow, and then we have to go and put more coils in it. But if the blood pressure is controlled and patient is not a smoker, the chance of that happening is very low. But once they're there, they secure the aneurysm. There are different technologies that we use now in combination. So sometimes if the coils are not enough and we see that there's still aneurysm filling, we put a stent in across the coils, and the stent will take care of the rest of the aneurysm. But for the most part, they don't require any maintenance other than being monitored. So we do monitor them with every year with MRIs.
And Commissioner. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to take questions from the dais right now, and I'm going to call on Commissioner Mortimer. Did you have a question?
Excellent presentation. You mentioned time. So in the examples that you showed, were they all there in an hour or 2 hours, or how long did this whole thing, because the results were remarkable, of course.
Yeah. So most of these patients were within a couple of hours, I would say. But there are two factors. If you're having symptoms of a stroke for 3 hours, doesn't mean that you're not going to qualify for the treatment. You can still have very good outcomes if you have other channels supplying that part of the brain. So the tolerance to ischemia or lack of blood flow is very individualized. Some people will tolerate it for an hour. Some people can tolerate it for several hours, depending on your body ability to keep that brain alive until the blood clot is removed. So if you come within the first hour, that's golden, but within the first couple of hours, still you can have very good results.
I'd also think from your presentation, the progress that you've made in the last 5 to 10 years compared to what went on before is remarkable.
It's tremendous, yes. I mean, it's a huge difference how we treat a stroke now as compared to what it was only a few years ago.
Very, very interesting.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Mortimer.
Thank you. I had seen you at the Reagan Library in February for that Heart and Brain Symposium. So that's where I picked up the FAST acronym, and it stuck. So that's a good thing. My question is, and you may have already answered it by one of these slides, like someone that's having a heart attack, usually they're having symptoms weeks before and they're like ignoring them, like my husband, but don't tell him I said that. Is there something like that with a stroke where maybe a couple of weeks beforehand there's some, a precursor?
Yeah, so the TIA that we talked about, or a mini stroke, that's what it is. If you have a stroke symptom and they come and they go away, that means that you are at risk of having a major stroke in the next few days.
Would you know that you're having that? Is it as intense?
It could be as subtle as just having one side of the body goes numb, or just having a little bit of facial droop and it gets better. Or it could be as severe as developing a full weakness and then get better.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Belding.
I have two quick questions, if you don't mind. One of them is, how can you tell, or should you just go anyway, the difference between Bell's palsy? I had Bell's palsy, and I actually thought I was having a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
Would the only difference be the arm? Would that be the difference, that you couldn't move other parts of the body because the speech was altered and the face was numb on one side?
You can't. At home, you can't differentiate. So even a lot of time, the clinicians would have trouble differentiating, and if you're not sure. So there are signs on physical exam. The facial Bell's palsy usually affect the entire face. A stroke affects the lower half of the face only. It spares the top part of the face, because that part of the face is innervated by both sides of the brain. So if you're having a stroke on this side, it doesn't affect the top. Like the frowning would be intact, but the rest of the face would be paralyzed.
But it's very subtle, and again, you cannot determine that at home. So if you did the right thing. So if you're having the symptoms, you can differentiate between Bell's palsy and stroke at home. You need to go to the hospital.
Okay. And my other question is, if someone is having a stroke, a lot of the people on the presentation had a family member or people having dinner together for somebody to call. Is there a good chance that a person who's by themselves may not be able to articulate well enough to call 911?
Yeah, that happens unfortunately a lot of time. That people are by themselves, and then either the family members find out several hours later, or they haven't heard back from. We get patients who the neighbors haven't seen them for a day, and then they call the rescue team. They go in and they find out that they've been having stroke symptoms for no one knows how long. So unfortunately, that happens if somebody lives by themselves. But if they have previous history of heart attack or TIAs, then I usually tell them to wear that alarm.
That's what I was thinking, to have that alarm. That could be the saving factor right there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Thank
you. Commissioner Posta.
Yes, I always have loads of questions, but I only ask you two. First one is, I noticed that one graph of yours, it showed the East Coast had all of these strokes, and the West Coast was relatively light. I mean, that was a significant difference.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's between countries also. Could you explain why, maybe?
So one is the genetic race, and the East, more so the East, it's the South. So obviously there's more African American population in that area, which has the higher risk of a stroke just based on the genetic predisposition, and also the lifestyle. So I did my training in Tennessee, and you go into the hospital, you can smell the fried chicken. So if the hospital is to smell like fried chicken, then you can imagine how the outside hospital is. So that is part of the problem.
Thank you very much. The recovery time, plasticity of the brain, and the time it takes to recover, and is there ever complete recovery? And why do you recover?
So it's a very interesting question, right? So there's two ways of recovering. One is that all the examples that I showed, those are the patients that are fortunate enough that they didn't have any permanent damage. So we remove the blood clot, and then we salvage the brain that was about to die. So in that case, the recovery is instantaneous. These are all next day improvements. But that doesn't happen always. It happens 1 in 4 times or 1 in 2 times. The recovery later on is by neuroplasticity, as you said, which means that there's part of the brain which has reserved no function, and you go through the rehabilitation to make them learn new function that has been lost. So let's say if this part of my brain was controlling the left side of the body, and I have a stroke on this part of the brain, the part behind it wasn't doing anything, and now it's going to take over the function of that part. So that's called neuroplasticity. And that's the process of rehabilitation. That patient goes to rehab, and they work with physical therapists, occupational therapists, and kind of relearn how to use their arm or legs. So, and that is more likely in a younger age group, because as you grow older, your reserves are less and less. Your brain shrinks, your brain cells die. So the older population will have less chance of recovering from a big stroke as opposed to a younger population.
Or take a longer time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. How did you get so smart?
Okay. Any other questions from the dais? Then I would like to also thank you again very much for your excellent presentation.
Sure. Thank you.
And we will continue now on our agenda with Commissioner comments, which is Section 8 on our agenda. And we are going to begin down at my left with Commissioner Belding for Commissioner comments. Anything at that end?
I have no comments at this time.
Okay. Anyone else at this end? No?
Surprise, no comments.
Okay. How about this end of the dais? Yes, Commissioner Gitt.
So the Conejo Valley Village, which helps seniors stay in their homes and stay connected to the community, and is an all-volunteer nonprofit organization, is celebrating its 2nd year of existence this week. So we're 2 years old. If you are interested in becoming a member or a volunteer, you can call us at 805-372-1826 or visit our website at ConejoValleyVillage.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gitt. Any others? Any other? Well, okay. I have one comment. Last month during Commissioner comments, I told you about Rocket Man, the book that is the book for the One City, One Book celebration, being sponsored by the Thousand Oaks Library, and it is a fabulous read. And this weekend, the author, Robert Kurson, is going to be speaking at the Cavalier Theater Sunday at 1 o'clock. I'm sorry, it's at 2 o'clock, Sunday, April 7th, 2 o'clock, Cavalier Theater. I picked up my tickets. You get yours at the Thousand Oaks Library. And, I'll see you there. So come on up and say, hey, Karen, saw you on TV. And I read the book and it was great also. So that would be fun. And let me thank you. Next month, our televised meeting is going to be on May 1st, again here at 1 o'clock. And at that time, we are going to be celebrating 50 years of the Los Robles Regional Medical Center. So that should be a really interesting, fun program. And once again, I would like to thank my fellow commissioners for all the work you did this month, bringing together a very, very informative, important meeting. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting.